We're diving into a topic that is bound to spark some heated discussions. I've fallen out with friends because I didn't want to go to their destination wedding because I couldn't afford to.
How can they expect us to fly, pay, and ask for a present? Do you not think it's becoming a bit too much?
It's becoming ridiculous.
I always say, people meet you where they are at.
You're essentially spending money on something that you didn't want to spend money to. If you don't have friends who are noticing that, they're not your friends.
That is absolutely mental.
People do not value the same things you value, and people will fall out with you potentially for doing something that they are not perhaps included in. Do you think children should be invited to weddings?
Once you start having conflict over small things, bigger things come to light. The wedding was like 200K. They got divorced a year later.
Do you think that the bride should demand what colour dress and style the bridesmaid should wear? Why should you have to pay for me to be with my best friends? I think it's rude.
Yeah, I do too.
Today on A Millennial Mind, we're diving into a topic that is bound to spark some heated discussions. The pros and cons of an abroad wedding and destination hens or stags. We're going to unpack everything from the thrill and the excitement of a destination celebration to the potential strain it might have on guests that are going to be attending. We're going to unpack, is it selfish or is it the ultimate way to ensure that only your nearest and dearest are there? I love bringing these debates and discussions to the podcast every single week. It helps me to understand different perspectives, see my blind spots, and ultimately continuously grow. But before we get into this podcast, I have a tiny little favor to ask from every single one of you, and that is to press the like, follow, and subscribe button wherever you're watching this podcast. It's totally free. It takes under 10 seconds, but you have no idea how much it helps me to continue this podcast and get incredible guests on too. I'm so grateful for all your support. Let's get into this episode. Rhona.
Hey, my love, I've missed you so beyond much. Like, it makes me so fast. I'm like, most beautiful woman, most beautiful smile. I'm like, I've missed you in my life.
Well, you did my smile, so you can take all credit for that.
Thank you.
I'm so excited for this topic. I think this is something that we have discussed, but also something that I've discussed more frequently, I think, with my friends who are getting married and ones who have been asked to be bridesmaids or to be involved in a hen. So I want to talk about destination weddings and if they're selfish or not. Because as I was growing up, I hadn't been to many destination weddings and I saw them as a very fun and unique thing to go to. Right? And now I feel as I'm older, so many people are doing destination weddings. And something that keeps coming up is number one, the cost, and number two, the time that you're taking to go. Now, my personal opinion is if you want to do a destination wedding, you should do it. I don't think you should think about what your friends want or your family want or your cousins want or what society thinks, because I think if you do that, then everyone's going to have an opinion and you probably won't do something that you want. But at the same time, I do think you have to accept if people don't want to come. Because one thing that I'm noticing is people are saying, come to my wedding, and then they're getting upset if their friends can't come due to money or time or the fact that they have kids.
I'm really like you in the sense that when I got invited to my first destination wedding, I was so excited because I find it's an incredible opportunity. And the way that I see it is the bride and groom are spending so much money on this venue. It's such a huge effort to get like everyone there in terms of all the organisers, the food, the flower. It's such a huge effort. And what a privilege to be invited to something so special, because to me, I saw it as being much more effort and stress than a wedding in the UK.
Interesting. Why do you say that, actually? Because I think it's very similar.
Because, for example, I know that some people that did decide to have destination weddings where they didn't speak the language, them or their partner. So there was like this whole communication barrier, which made it a little bit more challenging. I also found that, for example, when I went to a wedding in Greece in my earlier years, it's impossible to get flowers to an island, which I didn't realise. There was just all these like logistical things that I was like, it's really difficult. So from the logistics point of view, I thought like, wow, like what a huge effort. Whereas in England, like a lot of the English weddings that I went to, and maybe it was just because of the types I went to, a lot of them had them in their homes because I lived with a lot of people that were from the countryside.
Got it.
So they'd have it in their garden, in a marquee and all that stuff. So it just seemed easier logistically.
That makes sense. I think I'm looking at my experience from having an Indian wedding, which is...
I'm the first one I'm going to go to is yours.
Really?
Yes.
I'm the first Indian wedding we're going to.
I had a friend of mine that actually, I lied, she did have an Indian wedding, but it was quite small for what I understand an Indian wedding to be.
What's small?
I would think a couple hundred people with that. Small, no?
200?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite small.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't remember having like 6-day soiree, like you getting 6 invites. I only went to like 2.
I mean, I'm not even having that many events, which
Yeah.
is quite funny because obviously I have sent you quite a few save the dates, but you're invited to everything. So that's why you're invited to like the small things at my house.
I'm so excited.
And then the other things. So in terms of organisation, I mean, I'm giving the other perspective here. This is not my own belief before you all attack me. But if someone chooses to get married in Greece on an island, isn't logistical drama kind of on them? Like, why is it on me? Why?
No, I know that, but I think that
Right.
from my perspective as a guest, I'm like, what a huge effort
Right.
that the groom and bride have made to
Agree.
make this happen.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
I'm so privileged to be part of this.
Like such a special event.
Yeah, but having said that, I think as I've got older, what I did recognise is the points that you brought up, where certain people were like, it's kind of, they describe the bride and groom as being selfish because they're like, how can they expect us to fly, pay, and ask for a present,
Right.
and ask for this, and ask for this? So some people viewed it as quite a selfish expectation, which I was like, oh, that never crossed my mind. But I recognise that in my life now, because, you know, I'm just recently married, I've not had huge commitments like children and, you know, mortgage and everything like that, that those commitments take precedence, and actually something
Yes.
like this could really put a dent into your pocket, and it could have a massive impact. So I think I'm not saying an act single because I'm not single, but it's like my lifestyle's like, oh yeah, I can go away for a week.
Yeah.
You know, like I've got the spare cash for this. Do you know what I mean?
Agree.
But I think that as my life changes and I move into the next era of my life, my priorities might change. And, you know, you and I even had the conversation. I was like, oh, Shiv, what if I'm pregnant on your hen? You know, I said that to you. And you were like, oh, like, don't worry, you might be the early stages. But I'm like, that will affect, like, of course, I
100%.
can't party. Like, I am not pregnant. Do you see what I mean?
100%.
So I think that I have taken for granted the circumstances that affect people's decisions.
I agree with you. I think that when you're younger, you know, when I was younger, I used to think any abroad wedding was just so much fun and so great. But it's also because I didn't have this idea in my head of a business. So I think the thing that frustrates me sometimes is if you're hosting an abroad wedding, understand that people might not be able to come because they have to take a big chunk of their time out, number one. And number two, it's a huge cost for people. So let's say you're self-employed, right? You're self-employed actually, aren't you, as a dentist? You're losing money by not being somewhere. And then on top of that, you're having to pay to go to someone else's wedding when they're saying you have to stay in this hotel, you have to come to this place, and you have to spend a week here.
No children, therefore pay for nannies.
Exactly. Now, if you have children and they're not invited, which... This is an interesting debate, actually. Do you think children should be invited to weddings?
Well, obviously, I had a very small, I would say more celebration, and it was like absolutely no children. My partner did have his nieces and nephews there.
Right.
But in general, it was like a child-free wedding. And the wedding that I went to in South Africa recently was completely child-free. I kind of get it. I'm not going to lie. I really get it, because I do feel like the parents of the wedding like really let go. They were able to really embrace the events, the opportunities, like staying out late.
True.
So I'm not against it. But again, maybe when I have my own children, I'll change my mind, because you never say never. But from the experiences that I've been to where it's been child-free, I just felt like people were embracing the experience more. However, again, what were their circumstances to allow that to happen? Because it's a broad wedding. Who's looking after the kids? Do they have family? Can they afford nannies? Etc. etc. etc.
Do they trust those people?
Also,
are the kids okay without them? Yeah.
Exactly. Like, you know, you don't know. You might have a child that really struggles, like has real attachment at the early stages of their life. You're going to be stressed out. Do you know what I mean? So there's all these different factors that you've got to think about. And I do think it's individual. So I think whatever the bride and groom choose to do, they can't expect their guests, like you say, to 100% turn up. Luckily, though, I have seen people give allowances. And I don't know what it's like for you. So, like, for example, a friend of mine got married, her friend got pregnant, was really heavily pregnant, and was like, I can't come, I'm too tired. And there was no drama. It was like, cool, that's a life circumstance. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like there has been leeway in my friendship circles and my extended circles where people have understood. I don't know.
It's really interesting you say that, because I put a poll up on my Instagram and someone said, lots of people said, I've fallen out with friends because I didn't want to go to their destination wedding because I couldn't afford to, and they didn't understand. And there was also someone that said that they were going to their friend's wedding. They were the maid of honor. And they were asked to stay with the bride in the hotel that the bride was staying at, which was really, really expensive. It was something like, I don't know, £300 a night for one person, right? And she said that the bride said, because you're my maid of honor, I want you to stay with me in this hotel. And the friend was like, can I just stay at the hotel next door? And she was like, no.
Okay, I have a question for you, though.
Yeah.
I have another question for you, just leading on to that. Do you think the bride and groom are responsible for paying for the accommodation of the groomsmen and the bridesmaids?
Of the groomsmen and the bridesmaids, or the whole wedding?
No, the groomsmen and the bridesmaids only.
Oh, I've never thought about that.
I've had people that have done that. So for that reason, they have paid for the bridesmaids and the groomsmen, best man, whatever. So just that kind of part of the party, maybe some of the family.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of that. It's like if you're expected to, because you know they have the duties,
right,
and you're expected to be there and be on time. That's what they've done. But again,
I think that's fair. If you have given bridesmaids and groomsmen duties and said, I want you to help, I want you to be here on time, I want you to be in my room, I want you to be there doing my makeup, whatever it is, and you expect them to be there, and you are choosing to get married at a really expensive hotel, you should pay for them.
Yeah.
If you're expecting them to be there at like your beck and call. What are your thoughts on, if you do a destination wedding, should you pay for your guests to come?
No, I think, well, it really depends, right, on the financial situations. Because again, what if the bride and groom have put a load of money away for this special event and they can only afford the wedding itself and not to pay for the guests? But then they can't have the expectation that everyone can afford to come, or everyone's circumstances will allow them to come. Sure, if you're a really rich couple, like, you know, and you can afford to it, you know, millionaire friends, hey, you know what I mean? Like, sure. But, you know, I've never had that experience personally. And I think it's incredibly rare.
It's really generous. I mean, I have had that before and I think it's amazing. One thing I will say on that from people who I know who have paid for people to go, and this actually comes also when you think about paying for people's like hair services. So this is like a new thing at destination weddings.
Do you not think it's becoming a bit too much?
It's becoming ridiculous. So not only some people pay for your hotel and your rooms, but actually they're paying for your hair services and for you to get ready and your makeup on the day. So people say that a lot of the time when they've gone to destination weddings and the bride and groom have paid for their rooms, people just go because it's a free holiday, not because they actually want to go for the couple.
Yeah,
right? And then on top of that, when they're doing their hair and makeup, they're so rude to the staff because they're not paying for it and they're only going for the sake of it. And so I actually don't know how I feel about that, because I was having this conversation with one of my friends who was going to do that for her wedding, and she said, every time I've been to a destination wedding and the bride and groom have paid for people's hair or makeup, you find people at like 3 o'clock are leaving the event early. You know, in Indian weddings, you have like 5 million events. So you have like a pool party and people will leave at 3 because they'll be like, I've got to get ready for 6 and I need someone to do my hair and makeup. Whilst if you're doing it yourself, you'd probably go to the room at 5 and do your hair and makeup in an hour. But it's more the fact that you have to queue in the system, you have to be a first come, first serve, and you have to be there early. And obviously they're not going to lead into the event time. So there's like a lot of things that are taking away from the event.
Listen, I'm going to say something because I think that this is just like me taking in. I feel like Indian weddings specifically are quite political, right? Because I feel, and obviously because I've not had much exposure to it, I actually I did go to a wedding in Delhi and I flew to Delhi and I stayed in a hotel with a friend and I made that whole effort.
So you've been to multiple Indian weddings?
No, just two.
Okay,
just
right.
two.
So you said you've been to none,
but the Delhi wedding as well, like it was my friend that she's Swedish and she married an Indian guy, so it was a cross-cultural one. There was not really much indication of like dress code or anything like that, like not in the same way, because you know I have you, I'm like, oh, I really want to get involved in the culture and everything like that. But I didn't feel like, I feel like there's just much more drama with like, it reminds me of like, I don't know, some kind of program that you might find.
What do you mean?
I just feel like there's a lot going on. Like you said, it's quite political. Like there's
in what way?
Because as you said, you know, there's people that are leaving early to get hair and makeup done. It's like who's invited. I feel like
who's invited is a
there's like
big thing.
An auntie gossip culture.
Oh, for sure. But isn't that in every wedding? Isn't that in like...
I would say, like, for example, okay, I may be in Middle Eastern, but because I've never been living in the Middle East and because my parents have never massively exposed me to that side of the Middle East, I'm sure there is, like in the Arab culture for sure. Yeah. It's just not, and obviously with Arab culture, it's all about like money and it's about showing all that kind of thing. But like I never engaged in any of that. And also I obviously chose not to have that. But I feel like because, again, and I don't mean to sound offensive, so please don't like call me out for cultural appropriation or anything like that, but I feel like with the Indian families as well, there's quite a lot of involvement. Like everyone's
loads.
really involved.
Yeah, loads.
Where, like, for example, when I've been to like really English weddings, of course you're going to get a few kind of like mother-in-laws that are like bridezilla mother-in-law types, but I've not really seen much drama or much expectation. That's what I feel.
I think drama comes from, though, like miscommunication. So, you know, Nicola and I, we have taken a total backseat of our wedding. I have absolutely no idea on what's going on. Yeah, I'm literally going to turn up on the day and everything's going to be a surprise. And that was because me and him are organising the registry, which is a 100-person affair, which is what we wanted. And then our parents wanted to do like a giant wedding and reception, which is kind of their event. And we're kind of just turning up.
I love it.
So there's no drama with us because we've all got our roles and responsibilities. I think the drama comes when you don't have roles and responsibilities and everyone's got a clashing opinion. And also if the bride's really opinionated and the groom is really opinionated and their opinions aren't aligned. But same with the bride's family are really opinionated and then the groom's family are really opinionated and their opinions don't align. So I do think with an Indian wedding, because there's so many events and there's so many different ways on which you can do events, right? You have a theme and you have the decor and there is so much going on. And so there's a lot to talk about. And when there's lots to talk about, there's lots of debate and discussion. And everyone has their own opinion, which is why both of us are kind of like the dream children who are like, do what you want. Like our parents are like, you guys are amazing because you're not telling us what you want.
But also I do think that there is problems because I think once you start having conflict over small things, bigger things come to light. So for example, this is actually quite a big thing. So there was a couple, my friend, she had a couple who were her friends in Egypt. She lived in Egypt, and one was Coptic Christian, so that's like me, I'm Coptic Christian, and the other guy was Muslim, and both of them worked in politics, and they've been together for like 2 or 3 years. They absolutely loved each other. They were very aligned like politically and stuff, and they always said like, oh, religion's not an issue, etc. So they got engaged and they were planning this huge Egyptian wedding, and then a few things had come up from the Egyptian wedding and how they wanted to do it. And in the end, I don't know how it came to surface, but it was like, well, what are the children going to be? And it's like, you think like they'd never had that conversation before.
Of course.
And anyways, they ended up calling the wedding because he wanted them to be Muslim and she wanted the kids to be Christian. So
but that happens a lot when you don't discuss
that sort of
what
thing.
The kids, like Nicola and I have already discussed what language our kids are going to speak.
Yeah.
You know, because I speak Gujarati and his family speak Punjabi. So it's 2 different languages, right? So I do think it's important to have those discussions before. But I kind of want to go back to the abroad weddings being selfish or not.
Yeah.
So I think the arguments against it are, it's up to the couple. It's their big day. You know, they've put a lot of effort into doing it abroad and making it a different experience and a unique experience for everyone to, I guess, see and also, you know, experience it in a different country. Because if they didn't do that effort, you'd probably be doing the same weddings as you are in the UK over and over again.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? And also, I think there's a really important point here around, we remember experiences more than we do material things that we spend money on. And often when you have an abroad wedding, you're bonding a lot with family. I think that's the biggest pro for me about doing it abroad.
But that's about your values. I think
exactly.
you're assuming everybody has the same values as you. It was interesting because there's this dentist who just opened up a practice up north, really successful. And he posted on his Instagram that he hates going on holiday. And for me, going on holiday is one of my biggest values. It's like top of the pyramid. Like it's like what I want to spend my money on. Because for me, experiences are invaluable, like you said. But for some people, not. Like for him, he was like, I absolutely loathe going on holiday. I hate being out of my own home, and like gave the list of reasons. So probably he might value, I don't know, a car.
Right.
And we can't take that away from him.
No,
you know?
not at all.
So I think it's important to note that because some people might find the experience of that actually more stressful than enjoyable.
No, I agree. So I was talking about the pros there, not the cons.
Fine.
But the other pro, I think, is the fact that when you're the bride and groom and you're doing this abroad wedding, you're almost being able to know who really loves you and who wants to come. If you're doing a wedding here, sometimes everyone just comes because they feel they have to.
Yeah.
Not because they want to, because they're like, oh, this person's going to think it's rude. And if I don't go, this person's going to feel offended. Whilst when you're doing it abroad, it's kind of a good excuse for people. So I think the pro for the bride and groom is the fact that, you know, you're able to really know the people that love you and want to be there. And you're in an environment where they're well-wishers for you.
Yeah.
You're not in an environment where someone's going to come and hate on you and be negative towards you, because you're only going to have people who want to spend the money and want to give up their time to be there.
Yeah.
Now, the cons of having it abroad, I completely agree with you. people do not value the same things you value, and people will fall out with you potentially for doing something that they are not perhaps included in. Now, interestingly, you said about the kids. How would you feel if you were like my bestest friend? Not saying that you're not, but let's say that I was like, Rhona, you're my maid of honor, you're my sister, and I want you to be at my wedding, but I am doing it in Miami or Mexico. You've got a 6 to 8 month year old, and I was like, but you can't bring the baby.
Well,
and like, you are my light and shining armor. We've been best friends since nursery. Like, I can't get married without you.
I think that it would be very selfish of the bride to do that. And I think I'd have that conversation because to separate a mother from their 6-month-year-old is a huge ask, especially...
Okay, what about if it was 1-year-old?
Again, you don't know. I think it completely depends on the situation. If you have a real friend, the real friend would basically accept what you explain to them. If you say, listen, like my 1-year-old, I don't feel comfortable enough having that separation with my child. I don't know if my husband can cope looking after the kid. Might not even have a husband. I don't like if my nanny will cope. Might not have a nanny. Do you know what I mean? I think it's all circumstantial.
Yeah.
But I think to cut people off is extremely selfish. And it's the same thing as when people get annoyed with something that you've done because they have expectations of you as a friend in life. I always say, people meet you where they are at. And one of the big lessons I learned through a couple of my friends having kids last year, I was taking it really personally that like I wasn't seeing them, I wasn't speaking to them, they weren't going like on holiday with me. And then I took a step back and I was like, their lives have changed massively. And when I touched base with one of my friends that had a newborn, it was really hard. She was struggling with the new life, her new identity. And when I spoke to her, my heart kind of like melted because I was like, wow, I thought all along this was about me and it's nothing to do with me because people will meet you where they're at. And where she is at is that she is time poor, you know, they don't have a nanny.
Yes.
Her partner's not at home. So she's doing a lot of this full time. Alone. And I think that that's the thing. If you've got a real friend, you don't create conflict. You take time to understand.
100%.
But having said that, because as you said, Millennial Mind is all about growth, mindset, and being able to really understand and reflect. Sure, maybe the Rhona or the Shivani 10 or 15 years ago would have been less compassionate and understanding of circumstances. But I think with all the knowledge that you gain from doing work on yourself and doing work, you're like, you know what, this isn't about me, and you have a frank conversation.
I think what you've just said in terms of friends being understanding is the most important thing in the world.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when people were writing in and saying this thing, I was saying, if they're your best friend and
They'll
they've
understand.
asked you to be the maid of honor and they're saying to you, I want you to stay in this hotel, right? And they're saying, because you're my best friend, then if they're your best friend, you should be able to have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
And just how they want you to care about their wedding and them on the day, they should also care about you and your circumstances, right?
100%.
I understand also when people lash out as brides and grooms. I think this happens more with brides, though, not grooms. I've never heard of like a groom not talking to his friend for an abroad wedding, but I don't know if that's the case.
That's when they usually get screwed over on the speech.
Really? Okay, interesting.
Okay.
But when brides have kind of lashed out, I think it's because they feel so passionate about their wedding because they think it's like the biggest day of their lives. And that's what makes me so sad as well, is that there's so much expectation for your best friends to treat it as their biggest day of their lives, but you've interpreted it as your biggest day of your life.
That's
do you know
what
what
I'm
I
saying,
mean?
is that you think the world revolves around you.
Yeah,
That's
you do.
the thing. Most people do. And what I've come to realise is people are just concerned with what's going on in their life.
No, it's 100% true. But it's interesting you say about the kid one, because I don't necessarily agree with child-free weddings.
Okay.
But I think that's because I have nieces and nephews who I treat as my own kids and I love them to death. And so for me, not having them there
Sure.
would be heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
get
Because I
it.
see them as my own children.
Yeah.
And also, I think if I had a baby and it was one of my close friends,
Yeah.
I would want to take my baby with me. But if it was a random person, I probably wouldn't, because I don't want to go through the stress. Also, I'd probably leave the kid with my mum.
Yeah,
Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? But
yeah.
if it was like my cousin, when my mum was coming to the wedding, then I'd want the kid to be there. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I actually have a different opinion on that. But there have been people who have said, if you're bringing your kids to the wedding, i.e. to the bride and groom, then why can't I bring mine? And I think it's really selfish for people to say, if the bride and groom have chosen for there to be a child-free wedding, I think people should respect that. But I also think the bride and groom should understand if people are not able to make it.
That's 100%.
If you don't have a nanny, if you don't have the time to go, if you can't leave the baby with someone, if you don't feel comfortable, if you feel like your child is anxious or has a attachment towards you, and you feel that they're going to be disadvantaged by you going to this wedding, I don't think the bride and groom can kick up a fuss.
Agreed.
And I think this is the whole thing that I'm trying to say is that if you are bride and groom and you have laid expectations on what a wedding should look like, those expectations should sit with you. They should not fall on the guests that are attending.
Agreed.
It's a choice. Do you think if you have a destination wedding and you're asking guests to pay, do you think that you should be giving them a gift?
This is another one that people find really controversial. And I think you probably noticed even for my wedding, even though it wasn't a destination wedding, we asked people to donate money for the refugee camp that I work in. And one of the big reasons is, and I'm really lucky, right? Because my partner and I are very aligned on this. We were like, we literally have everything. Like we have the home we want. We have all the stuff. I actually felt a bit, not gross, but it didn't sit well with me asking people for money, or buy us this for our house, or bloody a blender or something like that. And it wasn't even like, I find that like that's, and sometimes when you look at it, what is it, the wedding list of gifts, what's
like
it called?
Registry
gifts or whatever.
Gift registration.
And I find it like really like, this is so random, are you ever going to actually use this? Like sometimes there's just like really random things that
what?
I don't like something like an egg kind of cracker from like Fortnum and Mason. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, what?
Who is asking for an egg cracker on their registry?
But you know what I mean? I'm just like, are you really going to need this? And I think that
they might.
I think the thing is, again, and I don't know if it's reflective of like my social circle, because maybe there are people that are trying to build a home together, can't afford like the certain things in a home, so they will want to ask for certain things. However,
I get that.
if those are the people, it is unlikely they're going to be the ones having a lavish abroad wedding. Let's be honest.
True.
So I think that they kind of come hand in hand. And sure, if you are having a big lavish wedding, I think that, again, when I went to a big lavish wedding in France, the girl was Ukrainian. And again, she asked for money towards Ukraine to kind of help when it was, when everything was kicking off. And I was like, that's a really nice thing to do. And there was like, if you want to contribute to our home, you can contribute as much as you want. Does that make sense? And there wasn't specifically like a registry list. And I think that was quite a nice thing to do. So again, I think
lists are interesting, actually. I've never thought of it like that. That's quite, I think the way you're presenting it to me, which is something I've never thought about, is it's quite like demanding, like, which gift will you choose? But don't people put like different price brackets in there?
Yeah,
it's like £20,
but it's how awkward then if you're that £20 person, do you know what I mean? And you've just gone to this like £300, £1,000 wedding, for example, and then it's like, no, I got the whisk, you know, we bought her the whisk. So I'm like, again, I find again, it's a bit, it's also like it makes you feel worse about yourself if you can't afford. So I think if you're going to choose to have a really expensive wedding, you need to give. I like the option of allow people to kind of just contribute anonymous amounts, which is what they ask, and then they can do their own shopping, no registry gift, okay? Or like contribute to a charity and like making it all optional. But if you are going to be, as I said, like if you are these people that want to build a home together, don't have the privileges and stuff like that. But again, it's very unlikely you're going to have like a 300k wedding if you're that person.
No, I agree. I think the registry thing is actually quite an interesting one. I mean,
don't do that. I ain't buying you a whisk. Go on.
I actually don't have a whisk. Can you actually get me that? What do you need a whisk for these days? I don't like a cake, to be fair.
Exactly.
But I don't really bake cakes. But I want to talk now about hens.
Yeah.
If you're doing a abroad wedding and you've asked people to pay for their hotels, you've asked people to pay for their flights, do you think it is fair to then do an abroad hen and ask people to pay for their flights and like this lavish celebration?
So hold on, so you're asking me, is it fair to get people to pay for the hen and the wedding if it's both abroad?
Yeah, like if I told you I'm getting married in India, right, and to get to India it's like £600-700. You'd have to get a visa as well on top of that, by the way, so another £150. Then the hotel I'm making you stay in is £200 a night. That's over £1,000 you're spending on coming to just my wedding. Now, you're not going to come all the way to India for 3 days.
No, you're going to stay. You have to make
Some
a holiday.
people are going to stay and make a holiday out of it. Now, if you don't have the annual leave to make a holiday out of it, you're basically spending all this money on coming to the wedding. But also, I saw an argument online that there's a pressure to then make a holiday out of it because you've gone all that way. So you're essentially spending money on something that you didn't want to spend money to. So that's number one. Now, on top of that, if I'm then asking you to say, okay, Rhona, we're going to Mykonos on my hen, which we are, by the way. But if we're going to Mykonos now, after I've booked my India wedding and you spent over £1,000 on my India wedding, now we're going to Mykonos, which is an expensive destination, by the way, to go for a hen. Do you think that's fair?
Again, I think it would be circumstantial because this actually happened. So last year I went to a hen do in Ibiza And
Another expensive destination.
yeah, and the organizer, to be fair, organized for us to stay in a villa for free because one of the girls had a villa there, so the
Oh my God,
accommodation was
amazing.
sorted.
Okay.
We were expected to pay for the bride.
This is something I want to talk about after, but
Fine.
yeah.
And then two of her best friends from home couldn't come because they couldn't afford it. She
Okay.
didn't take offense to that.
Okay.
But from my perspective, I was like, how sad that like her best friends can't be here. Do you know what I
Exactly.
mean? They weren't offended, but they were really honest. Money's tight. She was really understanding.
Fair enough.
And it was what it was. And the people that could afford to go, go. But I was like, it's kind of sad they're not here. They're like her childhood friends. You know what I mean? And so I thought that, but from their perspectives, they were quite cool with it. Step further, one of the friends couldn't go to the wedding either for financial reasons because it was abroad, the wedding.
Really?
And this is one of her friends that's like not childhood, but like mid-teens or whatever, like friend.
Do you think it's quite like elitist, or you're pricing people out to say only if you can afford it you can come if you do a hen or a wedding abroad?
I don't think so, because I don't think people would say that overtly. I think when people want to do what they want to do, they might be like, my preference is to do this. There are going to be people that can't afford it, and I'm okay with that. You might say that that's selfish, but on the other hand, they might be thinking, hopefully I'm only doing this once in my life and I should really do the things that I want to do.
It's really interesting on that, I think, because with my hen, obviously we're going to Mykonos, right? And as you know, you can like spend 10 grand in Mykonos. There is really no limit. Now, one of the things when cost was coming up was I do not want to price anyone out. That was like my priority.
Yeah.
When it was said that, you know, it's normal for people to back out of hens, and, you know, when you're planning it, people just decide that they can't come. That was actually a non-negotiable for me because I'm not inviting that many people.
So you were like, I want to make sure everyone can come.
Every single person who I invited, I want to be there. Right? If I was inviting like 50 people, then fair enough, you know, I'd be like, okay, well, not all 50 of them are my closest and dearest friends. It'd mean more to me if everyone was there rather than people saying, I'm not able to come because we're going to this club, or we're staying in this villa, or we're spending X amount on a night out. And I think that you have to be really considerate of that, I think. If you have close friends in your life who perhaps don't have a job right now, or perhaps have a business. And I was talking to a friend about this recently, as somebody who owns their own business, and you'll know this, every cost I spend personally, and this is just the stage of the business I am right now, I know that people are sometimes not transparent about this online, and I always try to be transparent about this online. I'm not in a state of my life where I'm making millions and millions of pounds. I'm also not in a state of my life where I'm making hundreds and thousands of pounds. So because I'm so dedicated to this podcast and my business, any amount of money I spend, like a big chunk of money,
You feel it?
I always compare it to my business. So if I'm going to spend a big chunk of money on something, I'll always think, can I afford to do that? And am I investing that money into my business also? Right? So I had this whole thing with the wedding was I didn't want to pay for a giant wedding and a big wedding, because if I could afford to do that, I would rather pump the money into this podcast and into the other things that I'm doing and hiring a team.
But I think,
right? And people have different priorities. That's not my point.
But I do also think the thing is, like, following on from what you said, like, we've had this discussion on a previous podcast where, for example, you know, where parents will be like, oh, we'll spend X amount, 50K, 100K, whatever it is on a wedding. And some kids might be like, Mum, Dad, I'd rather you give me that money to start my business.
Yeah,
or
but
for a
they
house.
won't.
But they won't.
Because it's for them. The wedding is for them.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
the thing is that I feel that is also really difficult, and like that was the thing, like, and I think about some of the times, like, I have a friend of mine that got married, the wedding was like, I don't know, 200K, they got divorced a year later.
So
do you know what I
stupid.
mean? And I'm like, that is absolutely mental. And the wedding that I went to in South Africa now was unbelievable. It was one of the best weddings I've ever
How many
been to in my
people?
entire life. I want to say 200.
Okay,
Yeah,
still
but
quite a lot, okay.
but it was so beautiful, and like being in
Really?
Africa is just unbelievable. And we did make it a whole holiday, and I found it utterly magical. But as you said, it was a massive bonding experience. But most of my friends don't have kids, and some of them are like
Yes.
newly married,
So
newly in
true.
relationships, newly fiancéed, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's different stages of life. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think that all those things need to be taken into consideration.
I also think that at this stage of our life, you know, I think there's two arguments. When you're younger, in your 20s, you don't have a lot of money. But when you're in your 30s, you're almost building for your life. You're buying a new house. You're saving up for kids. You're saving up for private school. You're saving up for tuition. All of these things, they add up. And so I don't know if it is fair, personally, to ask your guests to spend this like a huge amount of money to do a destination wedding abroad and to do a destination hen. I actually think if you're not going to pay for your guest accommodation when you're doing it abroad, I don't know if it's fair to do a destination hen.
Yeah.
Both. I personally think, because if you think about it, it's not just the money, it's the time. If you have a 9 to 5 job, you have 5 to 6 weeks of annual leave, right? If you're doing a destination wedding, and that's 1 week, and then you're doing a hen on top of that, that's another week. That's like a week and a half, or sometimes 2 weeks. So that person only has 3 weeks left of their holidays.
Yeah.
And so if you have multiple destination weddings and hens in a year, all your annual leave is spent on that. Yeah. And I've had friends who have told me that, all my annual leave this year is spent on other people's weddings. And I think, how sad is that? You don't have any time for yourself. In one way, if it's your closest friends, though, it can be really special and really nice.
I think that also you've got to learn to start saying no, because I also it was this year or this era of everyone getting married.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I'd find myself exhausted and at weddings where I'm like, I like this person, but I'm not super close to them.
Yeah, why am I here?
And it's a lot of time, energy, and money. Do you know what I mean? And I got more picky, and I got really picky about hen dos. With hen dos, for example, even if I was attending the wedding, I was like, is it the vibe that I am going to enjoy as well? Yes. I was a bit selfish about it as well, because I was like, look, the bride is important to me, but if it wasn't someone that I was super close to, but I was still invited on the hen, you know how sometimes you had that?
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not going to go just for the sake of it, especially as somebody that doesn't drink.
Yes.
Or do any of that stuff. It was a lot of pressure on me to stay out.
Yes.
I didn't enjoy those activities of people drinking through willy straws and having these hats saying bride to be. But I was like, I hate that. I hate all of that.
We're not doing any of that.
Yeah, it's good. But I was like, all that stuff was really difficult for me because as a sober person, and I was like, I'm really uncomfortable, tired, and I just I'm not putting myself through that. So unless it's someone that I'm super close to, like you, last year when I went to the girl who had her wedding in her hen in Ibiza, I was like, I love Ibiza. Yeah. Even though I didn't really know the other girls, I was like, I always have loved Ibiza. So for me, it was just a really nice experience.
I want to talk around the drinking point, because one of the things that someone said to me on Instagram was, the reason why I'm not going on the hen is, one, they're having a destination wedding, so I'm paying for that. But let's just say they're not having a destination wedding, right? I'm going on a hen where the costs are split and I don't drink, and they're not taking into account the fact that I drink. Now, this is a
Babe, I have to do this all the time for dinner.
Sensitive topic.
When a dinner bill comes, do you think that the teetotal non-alcoholic should pay for the alcohol portion of the bill?
No, absolutely not. And I think if you don't have friends who are noticing that, they're not your friends.
I'm literally paying for bottles of wine, cocktails, and that can come up
ridiculous.
It hikes up the bill by a couple of £100
it's
sometimes.
a lot, especially in London.
Alcohol is so much, and I'm sitting there thinking, I've just had a steak and salad. Do you know what I mean? And I'm here paying for wine.
I mean, a steak and salad is still a lot,
yeah, but you know what I mean? I was like,
this
is
such a you thing to say. I just had a steak and salad.
Guys, I'm not saying it's an expensive steak. I'm talking about a steak worth I don't know, £20, and the salad is £6. Do you know what I mean?
Where are you eating?
Don't know,
You're such a liar. You don't. You are not going to a place where a steak is £20.
Yes.
Where is a salad £6 these days?
Side salad.
Okay.
Fine.
I was like, even a salad at Assis isn't even £6. I'm like,
no,
where are you?
Side salad.
Have you ever confronted someone and said, hey, I didn't drink, and the alcohol bill has added to an extra £100 on your bill? Have you ever said anything?
No, I get really embarrassed.
Why?
I don't know.
I mean, I don't either, so I'm just interested in your perspective.
I hope I don't come across as being cheap.
Yes. But it's really difficult because I
But then I feel annoyed because I'm like, I don't value alcohol because I don't drink it. So
and also then I went to this dinner once where the girl was drinking. She had 4 margaritas. 4.
And did you have to pay for them?
£35 each. And I had a heart attack. And I obviously just thought when the bill was going to come that she wasn't going to say anything. I just thought she was going to be like, obviously, we'll do it separate. And she didn't. And I didn't say anything. And I felt so angry at myself because I was like, why am I such a mug? But then the argument is, if you and I have gone for dinner, let's say, well, I'm vegetarian. We thought I was vegan, which is so ridiculous. But anyway.
Definitely told me that at one point anyway.
I used to be. But anyway, I'm vegetarian. And let's say little miss you and you're ordering a bloody steak and salad. And let's say we haven't gone to, I don't know where you're eating a steak and salad for 20 quid. But let's just say you've gone to an average restaurant in London, a fancy restaurant, your fave. We know, I'm not going to say which one, but the place that you love to go.
Yep.
The steak is probably about 50 quid. Agree?
No.
Rhona.
Babes, Miss
I'll
Vegetarian.
look up the menu right now.
Yeah. Go on, look up the menu right
There's
now.
no way. £40?
No, it's 30. Honestly.
Rhona.
Honestly, it is.
Okay, all right. Okay, fine. £30 for your steak. And the salad is about 18. I don't know what you're on about.
Fine.
We have not, I've eaten there with you, and there was no salad for £6.
Okay, go on.
50 quid for your meal, yeah? Now I've come along. little miss me, and I'm having a soup, a broth, and the broth is £10.
So in those situations, I have been in a situation where it's even like the other way round. I do just split 50-50 because I think, however, if someone protests, like for example,
Who's going to protest though?
No, there has been. So for example, went to for dinner at a place in London. We were really hungry. It was kind of like after a night out, like an event.
Right.
So I was starving afterwards, right? So we went to this restaurant. So I ordered like fish, salad, and like another side, like mash or something like that. And then the person that was with me was vegetarian and ordered just like a side chips and a side salad. So when the bill came, she insisted that was all she paid for. And I was fine with that because again, I was like, what are her circumstances? However, when I'm in her position, when it happens to me, I allow it to be 50-50.
But hold on. Do you feel the same then with the alcohol thing? Because you seem 1% annoyed about the alcohol thing. Do you? What are your thoughts?
I think the alcohol thing just really annoys me because, like you said as well, like it's again because I don't see value in it. And number two, I'm like, it's just that much more expensive.
Right, the food's not that much more. Yeah, agree.
It's like you said, and some places in London, mate, like as you said, like cocktails,
they're like 30 quid,
and they've had 4, and you're like 120 quid. That's £60 extra.
Yeah,
each.
it's a lot. No, so interestingly on the food thing, I kind of agree with you. I think it's kind of petty to be like, you had 1 chip or you had 9 chips. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of annoying. I also think in friendship, it doesn't have to be exactly 50-50. You know, you had the mash and I had the fries, and the fries were £10 and the mash was £2. You know what I mean? Like, it can be, it doesn't have to be. However, I don't think you should feel offended or call the other person cheap if they protest, because
you don't know their circumstances.
I love that we're saying protest. Yeah. Protest is
such a strong protest. That's Shakespeare.
Protest is such a strong word, but I do think that you should feel comfortable if your friend is a good friend to say, by the way, I just feel like it was a bit unfair, and I'm just watching things right now because I'm saving for whatever. Or you shouldn't even have to justify. To be fair, if you like a hooligan order like 50 things at this place, and someone just ordered a salad, I think it's fair. Now,
you do have chances though. You know, sometimes you have those friends that are chances.
Meaning?
They like will order a lot more than you, knowing that you're going to split the bill. Do you know what I mean? You know, sometimes like that.
I've never heard that word, chances.
Yeah,
okay, interesting.
Yeah, chances. So they will... Or, you know, sometimes you've got the people, I mean, this doesn't really happen as much to girls, so I'm massively going off it, but the ones that always go to the loo when the bill comes expecting you to
that happens with boys though, I feel.
Yeah.
But in Indian culture, it's like if you go to the loo, the other person will just pay. It's like a very thing, like it's Arab culture too. You just like always want to pay the bill.
Habibi.
You made a really interesting point around paying for the bride on the hen. Do you think that you should have to pay for the hen when you go to a hen do? So do you think you should have to pay for the bride on her hen do? I.e., usually the bride pays for her flights, but do you think you should have to pay for accommodation and the activities?
Again, I have been asked to do that and obliged, but to be honest, I think it's a bit extra because I'm like, if everyone's coming abroad for you, I think, do you know what I think is a nice thing? Like, for example, say you do like the one big meal because you're away for hen, like, and there's like a really nice like bonding meal. Yeah. I'm like, cool, but I'm like, everything, it just seems a little bit excessive, especially when everyone's come and spent all this money.
I agree.
But I think if there's like a couple of things that everyone contributes to, like you said, a pool day, food, I think that's fair.
I think it's fair to do like a day. Yeah. And I think it's nice to kind of treat your bride. And you know, one of my friends was telling me this, you know, I want to treat my friend on this day. It's really special for her and I want to do something. However, I do not think you can demand that people pay for you. Yeah. And I heard a story of someone saying that they put it in the group and they were like, what are your thoughts on paying for this bride for the whole thing? And we'll just go with the majority. That's ridiculous. Yeah, but what if one person can't afford to?
I just think also
you're like pricing people out. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's so selfish to demand people pay for you when it's not their mates, it's your mates. When you're coming on my hen, you don't even know any people, right? You're coming with my best friends. You're not coming with your best friends. So why should you have to pay for me to be with my best friends? And then if you don't do that, I'm pricing you out and saying, well, don't bother coming. Yeah. I think it's rude.
Yeah, I do too.
I think it's really, really selfish. And I think this is what upsets me about when people get carried away with their wedding. I understand it's your special day. I understand it's about you. But it's not just about you in the sense that only your opinion and only you matter.
I think it's just, like the world doesn't revolve around you. As I said to you, like 2 of my best friends were heavily pregnant, as you saw at the wedding, my wedding, heavily.
Yeah.
Did I expect them to stay all night?
Yes.
Did I expect all of these things?
You're very understanding like that, though.
Yeah, but I think that like you've got to be realistic. Like they didn't plan to get pregnant when they got pregnant. Do you know what I mean? Like it is what it is.
Yeah.
You can't expect like 7-month pregnant women to dance all night and be on the best form.
Yeah, you can't.
So I think, it's really important that you have realistic expectations. And I think in this day and age now, like as we're going through an economic crisis, people are really struggling, especially in the UK. We're really, really struggling. And I think that the degree of privilege that some people have and the gap between some people is so astronomical that you've really got to be mindful and recognize that within your own friendship group, there may be people that can afford everything and there may be people that can't.
No, I agree. I'm actually just going to get some things up that people have said because I put it on my story and someone's just said, I don't feel okay to leave my toddler for 4 nights for a hen or a wedding and she just doesn't get it. What advice would you give to this person?
I would say you need to assess if this person is your real friend because ultimately friendship is about compromise and understanding. I would have the conversation first and say, listen, I know it's really difficult for you. I'm assuming the bride doesn't have children herself.
Yeah.
And just say, but once you have a child, you might be able to understand a bit better. But the expectation for me to just leave my child when I don't feel comfortable is a lot, and I understand that that's really, really difficult for you, but this is where I am at in life. If there is some kind of compromise, like the toddler can come with you, there's some support with like a nanny or help or something, and the bride really wants you there and can offer that, then great. But if that's something that you can't do, then she has to have that conversation, but she does deserve a conversation. So I think having that conversation and explaining it in a compassionate way is great. If she doesn't receive that information well, she's not your friend.
I completely agree with you. There's someone that's here that says, yes, that's the reason why we don't speak. And I don't want children at my abroad wedding, which is so interesting. One of the things here is how to split bills if you don't drink alcohol if someone's bought the chef special. I feel that, and this is my personal opinion, if you're going on someone's hen, they are your close friend. They're not just a random person, I think, because you probably wouldn't spend so much money on going on their hen. So if you are close to them, I think that you can't be so particular about what people order and don't order on the day.
Yeah,
I personally think.
I agree.
I think that. However, if you are conscious and going through a really difficult time financially and you really want to be there for your friend, I would say just let your friend know that before so that it doesn't seem on the night that you're being petty because you've already had that conversation with everyone.
Yeah, agreed.
Someone came on my hen and said, hey, Shiv, I'm really struggling at the moment. Do you mind just kind of keeping me out on the bottle service or keeping out this? I'd be like, totally fine. But let's say on the night someone was like, I kind of fancy this. And someone was like, well, I don't think it's fair. It would make it kind of awkward and make it quite uncomfortable. So it's not like I would ignore it, but I would feel like it was a bit like, it would kind of like be really confrontational or not confrontational, but I don't know, would kill the vibe a bit on the night. Whilst if everybody knew that person before was a bit conscious, I think there's nothing wrong with it. The other thing here I really want to say is people will make assumptions about you unless you are clear.
Well, we know that.
Go ahead.
I'm saying that in general, online and everything.
Right, okay.
People will always have their preconceived judgments of who you are. And just based on like a small snip, this is the classic of society, we don't give opportunity, we don't allow nuance, we particularly judge women, right? Like that's the whole thing. And unfortunately it's exhausting because women have to constantly explain themselves. I feel like if a bloke says to another bloke, I can't make it to your wedding, he's like, all right, mate, do you want to go for beer next week? Do you
Literally,
know what I mean?
I was thinking about this actually with stags. I was talking to Nicola about this. I was like, have you heard of people having any drama with like money or time for stags? And he was like, no. And it's really interesting because I guess traditionally men are the sole provider and pay for the honeymoon and all of this stuff, but they don't have drama over money, but women do.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I was thinking about this the other day and I wonder why. I don't know if you guys have an insight on this, but I kind of want to go back to this question of difficulties of going to abroad weddings when we have little babies and kids and the couple don't understand. And they were saying it's just so overrated and it's so overwhelming because all the weddings are the same. And I feel like I don't want to spend my money going to one.
But again, it comes down to the value thing because I disagree. Like most of the weddings that I've been to have been really different. However, there have been some where like intuitively I'm like, I'm not that close to that person. I like them. And I'm like, I look at it and I'm like, do I really want to go? And I'm a bit selfish about it. It really depends on how close you are to that person. But I do think you need to honor your needs and recognize like how important your friendship is. And I think, again, it's the constant communication and openness with somebody.
Someone's just actually asked on here, if you can't go to your friend who's a bride's wedding or hen abroad, what can you do instead? And I think that's a really, really important question to ask, because
I've had this before, and like I have a friend of mine who's amazing. You met her on Saturday. She is incredible, but like my husband is like, she's so flaky. I'm like, she's not flaky because she really honors her like needs and boundaries.
Really?
But what sometimes she does is like, for example, if she can't come to like one of my events, my birthday, she's like been my best friend since I was like 12. So we're talking about best friends.
Yeah.
She might not want to come to something of mine, and she's really open about it because she's like, she really honors her body and her boundaries. But she'll be like, I'm really sorry, babe, I can't come. But instead, I'm going to take you to like this spa or dinner in a couple of weeks. And there's like, because I've known her for long enough, because we're so strong, I just don't get offended.
Yeah, I agree.
And actually, I asked her to do a speech at my wedding, and she declined in the end because she said that she felt so overwhelmed with work because she was doing her PhD, and she said that she didn't have time to give it what it needed and what it deserved.
Wow.
And I didn't get offended. She was like, I know if you do your abroad wedding, because I always said I wanted, she's like, I will be ready for it then. I didn't get offended, which some people might do because they're like, well, I asked you to do a speech, blah, blah.
Yes.
But she was like very honest about me, and she was just like, I just feel like my brain is not really aligned with writing a speech at the moment. And I was like, cool, like that's fine.
That's really nice.
You know?
Did you have a maid of honor or bridesmaids?
No, because, and again, it was just like, I kind of did in theory. I mean, I allowed like 4 girls to the registry.
Yeah.
But it might be something that I do for, because my wedding was more like a rush job, you know what I mean? Like for me, it wasn't my dream wedding, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah.
And that was for reasons that you know about.
Yeah.
So hopefully one day I'll get to do maybe renew a vows wedding.
Yeah, nice.
You know, yeah.
On that, do you think that the maid of honor and the bridesmaid have certain duties? So, for example, do you think that they have extra duties? Because I was seeing stuff online where people said, and actually someone said in a question, they didn't reply to me, but they said, I prefer being a guest rather than being a bridesmaid because it's so much.
Yeah, loads of my friends say that.
What does that mean?
I've only been a bridesmaid once, but the girl with one of my best friends, she's not bridezilla, so it was very chill. But I think some people are bridezilla, like they expect you to do everything. Also, like a lot of girls are like, I hate what you have to wear. You don't have like autonomy to choose that.
Right.
You're expected to kind of like pick up these duties. It can be quite difficult, I think, if you've got bridezilla.
Okay, interesting. Because I've been a bridesmaid a few times, but I've never had any issues. So I was really confused by that question when someone said, I hate it. Do you think that the bride should demand or control what colour dress and style the bridesmaid should wear? Do you think the bride can say, this is the theme I'm going for and this is what I want? Do you think it's fair, yes or no?
I think it's actually really unfair, and especially because bridesmaids tend
Really?
I think it's unfair in terms of like, just hear me out here. I think more about like the style. So like I feel that lots of bridesmaids are different shapes and sizes.
Agree.
And if some people are really self-conscious about like their body type or shape, and then you're forcing them to wear a dress that might look good on someone that's like flat-chested, doesn't have a bum, whatever.
True.
It's like you're making them feel a lot more self-conscious. And it's like, if people have
I feel like you just described me there, by the way. I feel like you just described me there.
But I was
so
just
rude.
saying, like, I would hate it if someone
agree.
made me wear something that was unflattering, because it would make me feel self-conscious on the day.
Yes.
And you might say, and bridesmaids have had this where they're like, it looks so bad and I feel awful, but I can't say anything because they paid for the dresses and they paid for this, and it could be a colour that also doesn't suit them.
you.
So for example, the South African wedding, her bridesmaids look bomb. Like everyone was like, wow, because she's like, I think she picked like cream to kind of go,
nice.
but they were all different.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
love
like
that.
But then they all could pick the style that suited their body type, the shape,
Yes.
etc., which I thought was great.
I think that's great. I don't think that it's fair to ask your bridesmaids, the people that you love, to
wear
feel the
something.
best on your day and to feel amazing. You're feeling the best on your day and you want your best friends to feel the best on their day too.
Yeah.
To wear something that they feel uncomfortable in. And also people do have different insecurities about themselves. So if I feel insecure maybe about my stomach, I'm not going to want to wear a really fitted dress on a day that maybe I've been eating like a bloody pig, which I normally do at weddings anyway. Or let's say, for example, I'm really conscious about my bum because I have no bum, which you very kindly pointed out.
Babe, I might, no, I wasn't pointing that out about you.
I'm just joking.
But I've got too much. So anyways, go on.
But, you know, if if someone made me wear something that I wasn't comfortable with, I would feel conscious. However, I do think it's nice for the bride to maybe get the dresses for the bridesmaids if they want them to be in a certain color or be in a certain fit, or not fit, but material.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean? I think it's really hard if a bride's like, I want you to wear this brand and I want you to wear this color, and you can kind of choose a style of dress if you really want, but these are the choices and you have to get it from this place. Like, imagine if a bride's like, you all have to choose from Zimmerman. Can you believe?
Yeah, but and that's the thing. Like I told you, like the wedding that I just came back from, it was great. I mean, like one bridesmaid was like 5'1", and one girl was like 5'11". Do you see me? You can't expect them to wear the same dress,
yeah,
you know?
True. No, my cousin Rima, she did that. We were all wearing like different shades of green, and I really loved it. We all looked like we all kind of matched, but we didn't. And
yeah,
it
I
was
love
like
that.
really like cool, and we could all just wear whatever dress we
Yeah,
wanted.
yeah.
So I do think that is really nice. What do you think is the best piece of advice you can give people who are at home right now, who are struggling to have that difficult conversation with their best friend, who is perhaps having an abroad wedding or a hen, and they don't feel that they can afford to go, they don't feel like they've got the right time to go, whatever reason it is, but they're really scared to have that conversation? What advice can you give them?
I would say that it's really important to have a transparent conversation with that person if they're really important in your life. Perhaps have a coffee with them before you do any of the organisation or lunch, and be like, listen, this is what I'm thinking about doing. This is, roughly how much I'm thinking. I'd really like your opinion. Is it something that you feel comfortable doing? Is it something that is not manageable for you? I know you have kids.
Yeah.
Take their circumstances, like hear them out in this and have the conversation. If they're like, listen, I don't think I'm going to be able to afford to come to your wedding. I don't think I'm going to be able to leave the kids, etc., etc. Then be like, okay, I completely understand. Like, maybe we can find a middle ground. If we can't, then are you okay with me doing this as well? Because you can't expect the bride not to go ahead with their plans as well.
Exactly.
It is their day. And I think that real friendships are built on those conversations and people being understanding. And if that person that's giving or receiving the information is not understanding, it is a reflection that it's time to look into this friendship.
I agree. And I think that, one of the most important things to remember is what you expect from a friend should be what you give them.
Exactly.
If you are expecting your friend to be really considerate about your wedding plans, fly across the country for it, spend X amount on your hen, you should show your love back in your compassion and understanding if they can't do it.
Yeah, 100%.
You cannot say to your friend, you are my best friend, and therefore you must come to my abroad wedding and you must come to my abroad hen, if you are not being the good friend that's understanding why they cannot come.
100%.
Like, you have to have, friendship is a two-way street. So that's the one thing I will say, is that always remember that and have compassion for your friends, because it's not like they don't want to come. It's just like perhaps that they can't.
Yeah.
I'm so happy about this conversation, because I feel that it's such a difficult conversation to have. It's something that people are so afraid to talk about, but I'm really happy I had it with you, because you're so compassionate, you're so empathetic.
Oh, thank you.
But also the fact that, we normalize these conversations.
Yeah.
Difficult conversations are what makes us closer. Difficult conversations are what allow us to understand our friends even more. And so I think this is a really, really important conversation that we need to have. And also, I'd be really interested to know what other people experience when they've had this too.
Yeah, 100%. And as I said, it's about being open and transparent and recognizing that everyone has their own needs.
So true. Love you.
Love you more.